Hi, everybody. Welcome to the annual Abram Pilchik Lecture. I just want to welcome everybody on behalf of ourselves, the Wilhelms from the Upper East Side, the Kugels from the Upper West Side, and the Schmutzkins from Midtown and Chelsea. And I really want to thank Paula and David Mensch, and hello, Leah, for sponsoring this evening, which is guaranteed to be inspirational, and for all the previous years of lectures, and each one gets better and better. So I'm going to hand over the floor to Paula to talk about her father, who this evening is dedicated to.
Thank you, Devorah. Good evening, and thank you once again to Devorah and Yeye for organizing the 6th annual Chabad Young Professionals Lecture in memory of my father, Abraham Pilchik, of blessed memory. It's hard to believe that we're doing this event on Zoom for the 2nd year in a row because of COVID, but safety first, and God willing, next year we will be able to host all of you once again in person. This year, we are honored to have Michal Oshman as our speaker, who amongst her many accomplishments is the head of culture, diversity, and inclusion for TikTok Europe, and a former leadership expert for Facebook. As many of you who have previously attended this event may know, each year I try to tell you a little bit more about my father's life and relate it to the topic at hand. While my father may not have had a point of reference for TikTok or even Facebook, he would have marveled at your very accomplished life, Michal, and he would have most certainly thanked you for your service as an IDF officer. As far as relating his life to our discussion of Discover a Life Filled with Purpose, suffice it to say that as a Holocaust survivor who believed that with God by your side, anything is possible, he was the epitome of someone who was able to miraculously make that discovery and continue his faith after emerging from the devastation of the Shoah. Michal, if my father was here today, he would tell you how very happy he is that you have found the elixir of Hashem and the tonic of discovering how extraordinary it is to acknowledge the neshama that is within you, encouraging you to reach higher every day. When I learned of your story, I realized that the best way that I can relate my father to it and honor his memory is by expressing how grateful I am to him for being the compass that guided me to the discovery of my own spirituality. He was, as most of you know by now, someone who was involved from the ground up in building the first Orthodox synagogue in our community, dedicating himself to the support of Israel and many other Jewish charities and causes. Our home, however, was one that put the emphasis on tradition and not necessarily the letter of the law. I went to public school, watched as my mother lit the Shabbat candles, after which we enjoyed a beautiful Shabbat dinner that was usually followed by activities with my secular friends that to this day I hold very dear. My direction really could have gone either way, but for the fact that those Friday night dinners were also followed by Shabbat mornings, in which I devotedly went to shul with my dad, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Each week, I got to witness firsthand his beautiful davening, weekly infusion of Torah, and the respect that was given to him for his community leadership and overall menschlichkeit. I wanted to follow his lead. His shoes are still dauntingly big shoes to fill, but by the time I was 15, I asked to attend yeshiva, which is a story for another time. I was attending an Orthodox summer camp, and by 17, I became Shomer Shabbat. Thank you, Daddy. Now, I'd like to introduce Michal Oshman. We are very grateful to you for agreeing to be here with us this evening, especially since I think it's approximately midnight in London, where you are. Leonard Cohen wrote, "There is a crack in everything. That is how the light gets in." In your book, What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid, you write, "So while we cannot be happy all the time, It is entirely possible and natural to simultaneously carry sadness and joy, failure and forgiveness, heartbreak and hope, fear and purpose, all together inside. The former are the cracks that let the latter, the light in. We are all greatly looking forward to your expounding on this concept and to hearing your inspirational story. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to thank you so much, Mrs. Menchie, for your beautiful words and for your tribute to your father. I've never heard you speak before, but I definitely feel like I got a picture of the incredible man that he was just from your introduction. And thank you for all that you do in tribute to him. And I'm certain that it gives his soul an ascension. And I hope that all the words of inspiration that we hear tonight will, be a tribute to him. And thank you for doing all that you do for the community. For those that don't know me, I'm Peril Schmutkin, part of the Chabad YP in Chelsea. And it's really fun that we get to all hang out. I think one of the silver linings of this whole Zoom explosion is that everyone gets to be on their own respective couches all throughout the city and all throughout the world. Michal's joining us all the way from London, past midnight there. So I think, while it's always incredible to be together in person, we definitely can see the silver lining of getting to, have people come be together in some form or another from all over the world, and in our case, all over New York City. So we're very, very excited. Devara introduced herself a little earlier, but I want to just shout her out again together with Rabbi Yeye from Chabad Young Professionals on the Upper East Side. We have with us as well the Chabad Young Professionals of the Upper West Side, Rabbi Yisrael and Hanshi Kugel. You guys can say hi.
Hello, welcome.
So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We feel so lucky to be able to have Michal with us, Michal Oshman from London. And I want to share my first meeting with Michal, that I don't even know if Michal knows this, but my first encounter with Michal in true 2022 fashion was via podcast. So I do a long commute very, very often, taking my kids to school. They're in Crown Heights, and I'm here in Chelsea. And it's, for any of you who have driven in this very crazy, lovely town, driving is pretty crazy. You have to be on. It's an intense hour-long drive, and usually by the time I get to my kids, I'm like trying to take deep breaths because I'm like frazzled and stressed out because I just had to deal with traffic and pedestrians and cyclists and all the fun things that you do when you have to drive in this city. And I came across this podcast where Michal was interviewed, and I can't even tell you, it was the shortest hour-long commute I have ever taken. It was like Michal was speaking directly to me. Her message, her story resonated so much that I got to picking up my kids, and they were like, oh, like this is our mother feeling energized and feeling inspired and feeling uplifted. And reading her book after the interview, I feel like all of that empowerment and all of that connection that I felt when listening to Michal was just emphasized when reading her book. So it's really, we're so excited to be able to be hosting Michal. And I hope that all of you here joining us tonight can take away that same message of connectivity, of inspiration, of empowerment in our Jewish identities, in ourselves, in our being leaders in our own spheres, which Michal will talk about. And so just to introduce Michal, Michal, as Mrs. Menchie mentioned, is the head of company culture, diversity and inclusion, and employer branding at TikTok Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and was formerly responsible for international leadership and team development at Facebook. She has trained throughout her career and coached hundreds of tech leaders. She has 3 university degrees in psychodynamic and systemic thinking, sociology, and anthropology. And to top it all off, cherry on top, in my opinion, is the wife and mother of 4 beautiful children with whom she lives in London. And never mind that it's now past midnight and she looks more refreshed than I feel. I'm really, really thrilled to have Michal. And Michal, if I can start off by asking you, you clearly are extremely accomplished, both in your corporate, in your public life, I guess you could say, and also at home in your more private life, although you've been so kind to share that, so it might not be so private anymore. But, in your book, though, you do describe something a little bit different. And I was wondering if you could share with us kind of how that works together.
Absolutely. But before I do that, I do want to say hello from London. Thank you so much for having me today. If at any point my audio or my video doesn't work, please flag and tell me, because I don't want to waste anyone's time. Paula, thank you so much for your opening. I want to hear about your yeshiva days. Because I have this dream after discovering the beautiful Jewish wisdom at a relatively late age. I wish I had the opportunity to go to a 45-year-old Sem kind of girl's place. I don't know if that exists. I'm sure there is something. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you. And thank you for making tonight happen. And I wrote your father's name, Avraham ben Pesach. So the name and his memory is in front of me tonight. And it is tonight. It's after midnight. And I really hope I won't have too many interruptions because my husband's not away. And of course, my daughter just found her way to our room. So let's hope everything works. And even if it doesn't, it's going to be very normal because that's what life's like. So to answer your question, I need to immediately open up with the probably 60, 70 people that we have on the call now. So bear with me, right? I'm going to very, very quickly share with you, as you said, my personal story, because I think it's helpful for the context of what we're going to talk about today. So Paula, I did not know that your father was a survivor, was a Holocaust Shoah survivor. My grandparents from both sides were Holocaust survivors. So a bit of context on my background. This accent that you hear is Israeli, and thank you for the person writing in Hebrew that I'm amazing. If anyone needs quick translation in the chat, I think it was Oltal, but I didn't get a chance to read the name. So as you can hear, I have an Israeli accent. I grew up in Israel in the 70s. And I grew up with my parents. I'm their first daughter. My sister is much younger than me. But we also lived with my grandparents. And my grandmother, Chana, Savta Chana, she jumped off the train on the way to Auschwitz. Like many other people, she felt that something very wrong was happening. But she was brave and also lucky to be able to squeeze herself and jump off the train. She was relatively, she was very, just a second, Elia is going to come to you in a second, sorry. She was in her mid-30s and she jumped off the train. She was shot at, she was injured, but she survived. But as you can imagine, she carried these experiences with her as they arrived to Israel, and she met my grandfather and built a home in Israel. My grandmother's mission, I guess, in life was, or one of her missions was to prepare me for the next horrible thing. And she had this urge to tell me about all of her family, or most of her family, that were murdered by the Nazis. And she also helped me prepare for something bad. We used to hide tuna cans underneath my bed and in the attic. We hid together baby milk formula. And I share in the book how she used to pretty much force feed me chicken soup because she wanted me to be a bit bigger, a bit stronger. If horrible things happen, I can survive another few days. And, you know, you can imagine how that affects a young child's mental health when they actually are preparing for themselves for something really bad to happen. It didn't help, I guess, my approach to life, that my father was the head forensic pathologist of Israel for many years, maybe 2 decades. And for different reasons that I probably won't go into today, I saw death. I saw a lot of difficult sights. as a young child and as a teenager. And for me, death was just, was more than life. And you can imagine how that made me feel inside, but I did not share any of these experiences and the bad thoughts that were evolving in my head with anyone. I wanted to please my grandparents. I wanted to make worth their survival, and I tried to be my best. So all of those, let's say, accomplishments that you very kindly, read out, I think that many of them came out of fear. Out of thinking that today is the last day and therefore we need to do one more thing. So those accomplishments did happen, but they came up from a difficult place. I'm glad to hear, Paula, that your father would appreciate my serving the country as an IDF officer. I had a very meaningful service in the IDF. I met my best friends there, which, by the way, I met in Israel last week. We realized that we joined the army 28 years ago, which was quite scary. And once a year we meet from all sides of the world, reminding ourselves why we're here in this world and seeing how our lives have evolved. But the service was fantastic, but it was also challenging in many ways, a lot of responsibility. So I reached to a point when I was after the army, and I was a person that was really suffering from anxiety. Every day felt like mission impossible. Every decision felt like mission impossible. If a friend asked me, can I come over? I would be afraid to tell her yes or no, because whatever I say will, cause harm or death or an accident, God forbid. But I persevered, and I did all those things that you mentioned. I also got married, thank God. And at that stage, I had 3 children. And I went to therapy for many, many years. I think I spent about 15 years in the therapy room, trying to overcome this anxiety, trying to overcome this feeling that it's going to end every second, that the world is dark, that it's sad to be here. But even though I really tried hard through therapy, speaking therapy, and I took medication, I still had very bad thoughts in my head. And at the age of 38, I had quite scary thoughts. And you can imagine how that could feel when you have so much to celebrate in life. You have a family and a job and stability and financial, everything is okay, but inside you feel empty. You feel scared. You feel like you don't know if you can do one more day. And when I reached that point, I made a discovery, which I share in more detail in the book. And I'd like to share more about that discovery today. But the very long answer to your very specific question is, don't always believe what people look like on the outside or what their LinkedIn profile says. It's still true, but you never know what people carry inside. And I carried deep sadness and anxiety for many, many, many years.
And you describe it so much in the book, more at length than you've described it tonight. And I just want to point out, because I didn't mention this earlier, before I ask my next question, if anybody has a question for Michal throughout Michal speaking with us tonight, Michal is somebody who, as you can see, she's very real, and she wants this to be more of a dialogue. So if anybody has a question, feel free to type it up in the chat. If you would rather it be anonymous, you can also type it specifically to Yisrael and Hanshi Kugel, and we're going to dedicate 10 minutes at the end of this talk to the Q&As, where we can get even more specific with Michal than we're being pretty specific. But so this anxiety that you dealt with, and that was really kind of you carried with you from, like, as you said, a very, very young age, and you went through all of the, the regular kind of ways that we deal with it, that myself, I've dealt with it as well. You've gone to therapy, you've tried medications, and it didn't seem to be doing what you thought it should be or what it needed to be doing. What happened? What did you discover that then helped you heal?
Yeah. So in the therapy room, and I believe in therapy, and I think it really helps individuals raise, self-awareness and understand themselves, and even understand, their reaction to life and improve that. But what I realized was I was spending a lot of time looking back and spending a lot of time blaming my parents. And, now that I'm a mother myself, I know that there's no such thing as a perfect parent, and we all make mistakes, and I make mistakes for sure. But I spent a lot of time blaming them and being invited to kind of confront them. And I confronted them. I spoke to my parents. I grew up in a home that is a huge amount of respect to parents and grandparents. But I confronted my parents, and I actually spoke to them in ways that I'm not very proud of. I tried everything I could to heal. And I thought if I confronted them of things that happened to me and maybe they didn't protect me or shield me, that will make me feel better. But maybe it did momentarily. I don't remember exactly, but it definitely didn't stick for more than 1 or 2 days. So it wasn't healing. So I was looking for answers in a place that I knew wasn't the therapy room. And similar to you, actually not similar to you, Paula, I grew up in a home where in Israel, in North Tel Aviv, we were very respectful of being Jewish as our heritage and our faith, but we didn't practice or bring in Judaism to our family environment. So I'm sure you know that when you grow up in Israel, I mean, Israel has lots of parts of it and you can live in different ways. But if you live in a pretty much secular Tel Aviv, the way that you consume Judaism is by fault, right? It's in the air. At Yom Kippur, you don't need a sign. It's Yom Kippur. There's no cars around. It has an energy on Friday afternoon. Even if you don't keep Shabbat, there's no buses. Things start getting quieter, even more when I was younger. So, that was Judaism for me. And of course, we celebrated Pesach and Rosh Hashanah, but we celebrated it more around the food and the getting together. So I had no idea that there was a spiritual Judaism. I had no idea that there's deep meaning in Judaism, there's a Jewish psychology. I don't like calling it Jewish psychology because psychology is a much later term to, way after the Torah. But I think it's just the way that people can relate to it. There is a Jewish psychology. Within the Torah, there are ideas and guidance on how to overcome these experiences that we're all feeling, fear and anxiety and depression and despair. So that was my big discovery, and I share it in a bit more dramatic way in the book. At the age of 38, when I was pretty much ready to give up on maybe not life, but joy, and taking a deep breath and hearing, the birds and all of that, when I was very ready to give up on that, and maybe life at a point, I made this discovery. So it was a life-changing discovery to learn that within Judaism, within universal Judaism, it doesn't apply only to people that eat kosher or not, or keep Shabbat. Anyone and everyone, Jews and non-Jews, that are curious about understanding the Jewish wisdom, there is a self-help, mechanism within Judaism, and that's my discovery, and that's what I write about in the book. And these ideas, in the last 8, I think 9 maybe years, I've been bringing into my family life with my husband and my children. I've been bringing into my practice at work in companies like you mentioned, Facebook and TikTok. When I coach people, when I consult, I bring the Jewish wisdom ideas, subconsciously to how I look at situations. And also I started living, like you, Paula, a more traditional Jewish life. I brought that to, my whole full life. And I am very excited to say that Judaism has ideas that can help us deal with anxiety. And I just want to make one differentiation between fear and anxiety, because unfortunately, we're so familiar in the last couple of years with these terms, and I'm sure people are reading, the recent research, how numbers of, people suffering from anxiety and depression are going sky high, and, connected to COVID as well. But I want to differentiate between fear, which is also a healthy feeling, right? A survival mechanism, right? If a dangerous wild animal is chasing you and you feel afraid, that's okay. You should be feeling afraid. You should be running away or, escaping, looking for a shelter. It's a healthy mechanism to be afraid because it helps us look after ourselves. But in the book, I talk more about the anxiety, the fear of what if, but not just in the context of the fear of death, which I mentioned, which was something I was very familiar with, but also the fear of not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being successful enough, not being as good as my other friend, comparing, jealousy, all those experiences that really affect our mental health. And we feel them in all ages. We can't say that only younger people or older people or this, everyone feels every once in a while, some more, some less, these feelings. And Jewish wisdom has answers.
You talk about purpose in your book. You have a chapter that says replace, you were mentioning fear just now, replacing fear with purpose. Can you talk a little bit more about what is this idea of purpose? How does it help to overcome that anxiety that so many of us deal with?
Yes, and I want to answer your question about purpose. I also want to say that my first discovery was that I have a soul, and that everyone on this call and everyone that's going to ever watch this, you have a soul. And that was a life-changing discovery. And it could be for people like yourself. Maybe you're like, yeah, of course we have a godly soul. I had no idea. The word soul in Hebrew is neshama. And, you know, neshama is also this word that you use in Hebrew when you want to say a kind person. But I never stop to think that neshama actually means something, that soul actually means something. And one of my very strong memories that I share in the book was once I discovered how many bodies my father conducted autopsy on. Sorry if that's bad grammar, I'm doing pure translation from Hebrew now, which is 40,000. That number was quite overwhelming to think about. 40,000 people that ended their life in an unnatural way. Children, adults, soldiers. And I remember asking my father, Abba, is there a chance, is it possible that in the bigger body that does get buried, there's a smaller body that doesn't go away, that doesn't end, a smaller body that carries on with all the memories and all the feelings and all the love? And he said, no, we're only flesh, blood, bones, and we finish when it finishes. And I remember that as a very, very depressing, very saddening thought. And I think I was asking him about neshama. I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't have anyone to have these conversations with, because my parents held a very, I guess, not a spiritual home, a home which was much more wired to survival and facts and figures and kind of medical, it wasn't a home that involved spirituality, and therefore I had no one to talk with these things about. But instinctively, I think I felt that there was something beyond. I remember thinking, how is it possible that all the love I feel from my grandparents, that it's going to go away when they end? It was very impossible feeling. And this discovery at the age of 38, that I have a neshama, and my children have a neshama, and my parents have a neshama, and that our neshama is as pure as it was in the beginning of the journey. Therefore, doesn't matter the sights that I saw, the things that have happened to me, I'm as pure, and I have as exactly the same potential that I had as a 3-year-old. That gave me a lot of strength. So this discovery of Jewish wisdom through the Tanya, and learning Tanya, really, I started building my bitachon again, my confidence, my trust in the world, trust in myself. You know, I was starting to building these roots slowly at the age of 38. You can imagine what it feels like when people think you have roots and you're grounded and you're safe, and you're not. And suddenly you have everything on the outside, but you're slowly building yourself. You're saving yourself, you're growing. It was a beautiful time in my life. And at that stage, and I'm going to answer your question about purpose, I discovered the writing of Viktor Frankl. So if people on the call didn't get a chance to read yet, Man's Search for Meaning. I really recommend it. It's a small and mighty book. It's not an easy read at all. It took me a very long time to read Man's Search for Meaning, but in the memory of Avraham ben Pesach and my grandparents as well, I do want to mention that Viktor Frankl, before the war, before the Holocaust, he was Sigmund Freud's student in Vienna in the 30s. And even before the war, before the Holocaust, he made a discovery. He was treating patients, he was a neurologist and a psychiatrist, and he was treating patients that were suffering from depression and anxiety. And one of the things that he discovered, that for many of the patients that are sharing these experiences of depression and anxiety, what he realized is that they didn't have clinical anxiety and depression, and sorry to use these terms quite loosely, but what they were really suffering was from a term that he coined, which is existential vacuum. Something was empty inside of them. They woke up in the morning or in the middle of the night and they shared their experiences of saying, I don't know why I'm here. Why am I here? Why am I in this world? I can't find meaning or purpose. These are words that he came up later on. And he realized that a lot of the pain that people are experiencing, is because they don't know why they're here. And they are not even searching for meaning. Finding meaning is a dream. Searching for meaning is fantastic, right? Because you know you're looking for something. So the discovery involved understanding from Frankl how once we look for meaning and purpose in life, we feel better. And it's unbearable to even think about this, but the place that he actually continued his research, if you can call it this, is actually in Auschwitz. So he found himself a psychiatrist researching meaning in Auschwitz, a prisoner himself. And he supported the prisoners, but he also in many ways couldn't stop his curiosity of why are people wanting to continue to live in the context of the Shoah? Why are people not just running into the electric fences and just ending it? Why would anyone want to live under these circumstances? So being in Auschwitz, he was asking this question, being a prisoner and being a professor, a doctor in psychiatry. And what he discovered is that the people that showed a greater willingness to live, that found that you can call it resilience, that hunger, thrive to live one more day, was the people that also in the context of Auschwitz found meaning. And meaning could mean in that context, wanting to survive, to write a book about it, which is what he did. Wanting to survive could mean to build that hope inside of you that you are going to reconnect with your family, which is also what held him alive. He was wanting to connect with his wife, only to discover later that she was murdered as well. And meaning could also be to help another fellow prisoner find an extra piece of or crumb of bread to survive one more day. So in his time in Auschwitz, Viktor Frankl discovered that finding or searching for meaning is life-saving. And I know that this happened in the 30s, 40s, but it's relevant today. I do believe that today, many of us experience this existential vacuum. Often it looks like we have so much, and we do, right? You read a beautiful list of those things, but sometimes when we're suffering, it's a way of our soul to send us a signal, hey, you have lots of things, but maybe you've yet connected to what your soul, need of you now in this phase of your life, and encourages us to really search for what's meaningful for us now. I know that for Paula, this evening is very meaningful for you. It's part of your purpose to share the story of your father and for each of us to take part of him inside our soul, which is what all of us are going to do today. So this discovery from Frankl, I want to bring it to today, to where we are today, February, March, I don't know, I think we're between the months. We're very close to Aleph Adar, Bet. So let's use the Jewish calendar. And to say that for many of the challenges, emotional challenges that we feel today, I do believe that the search for meaning can be very helpful.
You bring a beautiful image that comes from an old Hasidic saying that a lot of people are very familiar with. And as you talked about in Israel, certainly it's a very popular song. I feel like every time you get together in Israel, it always either starts with this song or it ends with this song, but the whole world is a very narrow bridge. And I love the way that you depict that and you use that as this analogy in your book. Can you tell us a little bit more how that connects with this idea of that search?
Yes, so of course, I think I define myself, I think in the book in the beginning as a culturally Jewish family. I didn't know, I have this allergy of trying to box anyone in a box or in a drawer. So definitely I wouldn't do it to myself, but I think many Israelis and Jewish people or anyone that visited a shul in a certain holiday, would hear the tune of Kol Ha'olam Kulo Gesher Tzar Meod. Gesher Tzar Meod Va'ikar Lo Lefachid Klal. Lefachid is fear. And I chose to put this song, this Jewish song in the back of my book because I didn't realize how much it tells us, about our DNA, about our heritage. And the whole world is a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge. And the main thing is to have no fear at all. And even though this was written a few hundred years ago, it does tell the story of the Jewish people thousands of years back. And our story is a story of overcoming fear. One of the biggest discoveries that I made is that we were never supposed to, we were never wired, we were never created to be perfect. And I, again, grew up in a home where I did everything I could to be perfect in all ways you can think about, internally, externally, at school, with friends, never say the wrong word. And when you put so much pressure on yourself to be perfect, of course you feel anxious. Of course you're afraid of failure. My biggest fear in my life was to make mistakes. And when I heard this song again, and I heard it a lot in the army, but when I heard the song again towards my 40s, I realized it's okay to be afraid. We will be afraid. But I also learned that we have a gift to overcome this fear, and that life is filled with bridges. It's just the way it is. And bridges in life could be a relationship. It could be making a career decision. It could be sometimes actually separating from a person or an environment that's not good for you. It could be, a bridge of starting to learn something new, educating yourself on something that you're curious about, but you don't know well enough. And those bridges are invitations to overcome fear. I don't believe in taking unnecessary risk at all, but I do believe that all of us should remind ourselves that we are going to face bridges all the time and that we have a choice. And that Jewish wisdom encourages us to take that step forward on the bridge, that we can take that leap of faith. And I loved, I'm not an educator in Judaism, and I'm not a Rebbitzin like you, Paula. Don't ask me halakha questions. I mean, maybe you are now more advanced, but I'm surely not. So everything I learned about from the Torah, and I can bring it to my everyday life, I was like, it blows my mind how awesome it is that something from 3,000 years ago is relevant to my life and my family life now. And I love the story of how we accepted the Torah, and I'm going to tell it in my own words, right? How I was taught in my Chabad community. And of course, this is like my story. It's not the proper version. But when God was ready to give the Torah to a nation, he was doing a bit of like additioning, right? Of course, this is my words. And the different nations, when Hashem was kind of, considering them, they asked lots of questions, right? So let's say the Torah was a bridge, and those nations ask, so what's this Torah all about? What does it mean? What do I need to do? Really kind of get some reassurance, some assurances, some guarantees. But it was only the Israelites, the Jewish people later on, that said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We shall do and we shall listen and learn. And this first reaction of Na'aseh, of doing before you know exactly how this thing is going to turn out, without any guarantees and any assurances, this taking action spirit of Na'aseh, which is a very active word also in Hebrew, I found that really inspiring. So I connect the Na'aseh v'nishma to the narrow bridge. And I think that today we can allow ourselves, if it's the right bridge, to take a step. And I'm sure that people here on the call, if you wanted to take a minute to think for yourself, and you don't have to share, of course, a bridge that you're facing now, a decision, an opportunity that you're looking at, and you kind of feel you belong in the other side of the bridge, but you're also afraid. I want to say to you, it's natural to be afraid. But if you feel like you belong in the other side of the bridge and it's your bridge to cross and own, maybe it's worth considering taking that first step. And I also believe it's nice crossing bridges not by yourself. So finding a chavera, a friend, a trusted advisor, a rabbi, a selech harav to cross bridges with, it helps you get to the other side.
You bring up a very personal story in your book that certainly seemed like a very, very long, difficult bridge to cross. Just to connect back to that idea and that analogy, you experienced when you were younger, a very big heartbreak, and it was something that really changed you. And I loved, and that certainly, I guess coming out from that relationship was, a whole new bridge that you hadn't expected to be walking across. You expected one bridge and you got another bridge, but you write how there's nothing more complete than a broken heart.
Yes.
Which was a very, very profound idea. And I'd love if you could share with all of us. There's so many of us here that are, in different, in relationships or looking for a relationship or coming out of a relationship. And if you could share with us, a little bit, if you don't mind,
of course,
the story a little bit, and then.
Yeah, I will share the story for sure. And of course, it's a personal story. But I share it because we all have our heartbreaks and they hurt so much. And what you said, this very powerful, very important idea that we should all take in, which is there is nothing more complete than a broken heart. If you allow yourself to really almost like meditate on this, it can be life-changing, just this one idea. Because I know so many of us try to be perfect and want to have a perfect heart, and no cracks, no scratches, right? This perfect heart that has never been damaged. But I actually think that in Chassidut, we say that you cannot be complete. You cannot be a man or a woman, full, complete, without being broken or having the experience of being broken. So think about, you're not there yet, unfortunately, if you haven't experienced breaking. I know it's a sad or maybe, overwhelming thought, but breaking really completes us. So I'm going to tell you about this guy that was my boyfriend, and I was madly in love with him. Seriously, I thought he was going to be my husband in my early 20s in Tel Aviv. This, good looking, smart, also had a very special service in the military, and we were dating, and I thought, this is the one. This is the one. And I opened my heart to him. I shared with him things that I had seen and things that happened to me. I trusted him with my very personal experiences. I opened my heart. I kind of handed, for anyone that's been in love before, he had my heart in his hands. And on the day that I thought he was going to propose to me a beautiful sunny Tel Aviv day. We were walking on the beach in Tel Aviv. I felt something was going on, something was in the air. And I suddenly saw his eyes quite teary, and I thought, it's happening. You know, I even thought about how I'm going to call my mother after, and there wasn't mobile phones there, so I didn't think about what I would text, but I had the whole thing played out in my head. But in that moment when I thought that he was going to say, you know, Michal, would you marry me? He actually said, Michal, I see that this thing is becoming serious. And I was thinking to myself, who would I want to take with me to a deserted island? And it's definitely not you. So it's over. And pieces of my heart were everywhere. Pieces of all the things that I shared with him, all the trust that I gave him, pieces of my confidence. This person, my loved person, they don't want to be with me on a deserted island. I'm not loved. I'm worthless. I'm nobody. No one is ever going to love me. All of that took me really down for a couple of years. And this is, I guess, a romantic heartbreak. But we experience all sorts of heartbreaks, right? When things happen to us, when the world, God forbid, you know, breaks us, or we feel like we're breaking, losing someone we love, being hurt by someone we love, betrayed. Sometimes we break ourselves. Sometimes we do things that we regret. We're ashamed of. It breaks us inside. Sometimes we break someone else, and that breaks us too. So for many, many years, I was carrying this heartbreak with me. I carried on, I dated. Obviously, I met my husband, but I felt damaged. And this discovery that it's only through the breaking that I can be who I am today, with, please God, empathy to others, to my children. It's just a different way to look at breaking. And the way that you can think about this, if you have to think about it metaphorically, is if you think about a heart, and, you know, a heart breaking. It's only in the space between the shards of the broken heart that you can grow. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we do grow out of struggle. We do grow out of pain. We don't want to struggle or pain or experience pain, but it just happens to be that we grow through this struggle. And what Frankl said is, even in the experience of the Shoah, if you find meaning in the context of suffering, you grow, you survive. It takes a lot of koach, a lot of emunah, a lot of strength, a lot of faith, but that's where you grow. And again, this idea I share with my children, because children experience heartbreak as well at school, on WhatsApp groups, right? It's hard, you break, you feel like you're breaking. And I remind them, A, to come and tell me and share with me, and B, I'll help them in that space, in the, you know, in those gaps between the shards. I'll help them lift and grow rather than sink and feel sadness. So it's a very, very important idea in Judaism.
And now, thankfully, as you said, that heartbreak, but then a little bit later.
Much better version. Oh,
now you got a way better. I mean,
listen,
thank God,
thank
right?
you for leaving me. Thank you, thank you for not taking me. I don't want to go with you to an island, any island.
Your husband on the island.
Yeah, but you see, like, and you know when someone's in pain and they say, you know, it's all for the best, and you want to, you know, it is.
You don't hear that.
It is, and maybe not immediately, and maybe you can't see it yet. And if you can't see it yet, so you're not there yet.
Yeah. So tell us about, you know, you've been on this journey that you said started at 38, which is, you had been married already for a while.
Yes.
How is, if this is pretty personal, but take it how you want to. How has it been for your husband, with you kind of going on this journey? You already had started a family, right?
Yes.
So how has it been, you know, kind of, and I guess we all have this with relationships in some way or another. We like to think we never change, or maybe we want to change, and we do change. That's right. That's part of it. And you've been on this incredible Jewish journey. How has that been for your husband?
And don't feel nervous asking me, it's okay. First of all, the good
He's not
news
in the
is
room, so you can say whatever you want.
he's
right?
not in the country.
Okay, great.
So first of all, we're still together. So some things it's okay. My husband and I, Baruch Hashem, we've been together for 20 years. And when he married me, I wasn't who I am today. But I guess every marriage is like that, right? But being very specific on the topic that we're talking about, I met my husband in a restaurant in Israel, in a very non-kosher restaurant, where I was a shift manager and a waitress, and he was a customer. So, we started our journey as two young, mid-20 Tel Aviv people, secular, curious about life, students, and then life happened. And I am very blessed with a husband that I can be raw and vulnerable with. So Yair was the only person that knew about all of my bad thoughts throughout the whole journey, my whole time, with him. And, when I suffered a lot, I also behaved in certain ways that was part of, the marriage, let's say difficulty to sleep. Waking up many, many times a night to check that the children are breathing. I used to check on my parents many times a night as a child. So I just, pivoted that as a parent. And so, when your wife gets out of bed many times a night to check on the children, it's part of your life, right? Also at some stage of my suffering, I was trying to control life. I thought I could control life because I was so afraid of death. And at some point, I got obsessed with anti-aging treatments because I was trying to control aging. And I got to a stage when I was doing such excessive anti-aging treatments that I froze my face. So I couldn't smile and I couldn't cry. My lips were looking quite an embarrassing look. So, my husband faced that as well, right? So we've been on a journey together. That's what I'm trying to say. So suddenly this wife of his at the age of 38 goes to a Tanya shiur, a Chassidut shiur. And he was like, okay, great, enjoy. He knew I was taking a couple of hours, lunch break from work from the city of London, going to a shiur and coming back. And he was like, fantastic, she has a new area of interest. But suddenly he started seeing the sparkle in my eye that I think he hasn't seen for a while. And he became very curious to know what I was studying. So I shared with him the studying of the soul, and that the day we were born was the day that the world was missing us. So I started bringing spiritual ideas to our house, and it was beautiful and lovely, but, harmless, let's say. But the same wife came with Shabbat candles one day and said, I got this from a friend. It's been in the drawer for like 3-4 months. I don't know, maybe I should light them. Now, I never saw my mother lighting Shabbat candles, and I don't think my husband saw his. So I Googled it, like everything else I do for the first time. I Googled, how do you light Shabbat candles? And initially I didn't watch, I guess, the whole video. And Friday night was our night out, originally, Yair and I. So we went out for a date night. We came back probably 1 a.m. between Friday and Shabbat. We called it Saturday back then. And I lit candles at a convenient time for me. And, that was like a few weeks. And then I Googled it again. And then I said, oh my gosh, yesh zman. There's a time that you actually need to light this thing. And that time was not convenient because it was in the middle of my workday. So, I'm telling it in a really, kind of storytelling way. But we've been on this journey together. But I won't lie, we've had tensions in our marriage around this bringing Jewish life into our family. There were some shifts and adjustments that we made, and I'm the kind of person that likes going really fast and getting there because I'm an insecure overachiever. And he's a very chilled, calm, what are you worrying about? Everything's fantastic kind of guy. So it's been interesting. we are meeting now in a beautiful middle. I'm inspired by Judaism from my perspective and how it connects to me, and he's connecting to it from, we need to make sure that our children know who they are and what's their identity, and inject the family heritage in them, and we're meeting in this beautiful middle. The reason I love Chabad so much and Lubavitcher teaching is because of the importance of Shlom Bait, the peace in the home. And I really think if my friends in Chabad wouldn't kind of remind me of this idea, I would probably want to run fast on my bridge. But it's possible that if I would look to my side or even to my back, I wouldn't see my husband with me. And that's not where I want to be. So it's a very long way to say it's also a bridge, deciding to bring Jewish ideas and Jewish Yiddishkeit, I guess, into your family life if you weren't born into it. And I think I'm going to go on this bridge for a very, very, very long time. And that's fine. I don't want a short bridge. I don't want to get there yet. So yeah, that's how we're doing it at home at the moment.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and I think, being married a little less than you, but I think it's always a journey, right? And it's always something that we're trying to better and progress together. And so, yeah, to be on that bridge together, however long it takes, you're together, and that's so beautiful.
And laugh about it. And
yes,
I laugh. So. Listen, I know we're not going, I mean, my book is not a religious book, it's a self-help book. And I actually don't talk too much about, mitzvot. I mean, I talk about mitzvot that are inspiring me to, excitement like Shabbat and Tzedakah. But, I don't talk too much about kashrut, about kosher. But, when I started keeping kosher and I was working for Facebook, I have so many war stories of, I needed my husband to support me because I was calling him from these crazy mentions in Dublin when I don't know, you have that queen kind of layout of the table and cutleries with a million forks and spoons that you don't know what to do with. I don't care about those spoons because I have my double wrapped foil food that I brought from home, the only person in that table. And I needed always my husband to say, is it okay that I'm different? And he said, it's not okay. It's amazing that you're different. Get rid of the foil and have your dinner. So it's really nice when you have a partner that for the less, let's say, sorry to use the word sexy, sides of this journey, he's there for you as well as the beautiful spiritual moments like Shabbat.
Yeah. Clearly you're somebody who, you did it in your own life. You've been telling us how personally you took this, leadership role and brought really, brought a whole new facet into your family life and in your career as well. You've always been somebody who has taken leadership roles, and being a leader, it's something that you talk about in the book is kind of natural for you. But for those, listening tonight, that don't feel that same kind of necessarily that their personality, fits in that space, that they're not somebody who has those traits that make them a natural leader. What's your message to them of how to be able to be a leader, even if it doesn't seem like it's easy or natural?
So I want to demystify this whole leadership thing, right? And also demystify this thing of people thinking, oh, it's only the CEOs and the presidents and the celebrities have purpose, right? Purpose is this something that I need to be able to put somewhere, to show, to write, to post about. I genuinely really have a completely different perspective. I believe that everyone is a leader and has a potential to be a leader. And, I see myself as wearing different leadership hats, right? So in the book, I say that I'm the leader of my family. Together with Yair, I'm the CEO, he's the CFO because he's a finance guy. We lead our family. We lead our family values. We are responsible to create our family foundation, the ideas that make us us. So immediately, without even having like an external job or workplace, I'm immediately a leader by fault of having and growing a family. but leaders are around us everywhere, even though they often don't see themselves as leaders. I'm fascinated by people that I'm very close to who are community leaders, even though maybe they don't have the official title and it doesn't say that on their whatever. They're leading our communities. They're supporting families in need. They're the ones to know, the ones that send that WhatsApp before everyone else to realize we need to do something for Ukraine. When it just starts becoming news, before it's news, right? Leaders are people that are taking action, that are doing something for someone else, that are bringing ideas to life. So for anyone on the call here, and I've been looking at the people that, trying to kind of look at people's names, because I know sometimes it's not convenient to have your video on, which is completely understandable. Often I don't have that much makeup on my face. I do want to say to people on the call, allow yourself to think about yourself, because you're here for a reason, right? Because purpose helps replace fear. It also helps to think about you as a leader. And a leader doesn't mean this capital L leader on stage is someone that is leading on action, an idea, making change, right? Every single chapter in the book, I finish with a chapter, which is with a section, which is bringing these ideas to life. And it's called, If You Change Nothing, Nothing Will Change. And it's an Albert Einstein quote. And really, if you change nothing, nothing will change. So many of us want to see change in our lives, in our professional lives, in our private personal lives, in our family lives, within our bodies, our how strong we are, how fit we are. But if we change nothing, how is it going to change? So a leader is someone that is deciding, I want to change something, one thing. Sometimes it's just changing the way you look at life. Sometimes no one else is going to see this change. Just yourself, just that outlook on life is already an act of leadership that you're taking within yourself. And these are ideas that I'm sharing, with my children, with my, my colleagues at work. And I think a small shift in your head can result in a big shift in your life.
You talk about how you sometimes, you'll give these stern talks to yourself. You'll kind of self-examine, and you'll talk to your, you'll kind of have these dialogues with,
yes, to my ego. Yes, I talk to my ego.
Tell us about that.
So I don't know if you know this, but you also have an ego, right? So, when you discover the soul, that's beautiful, but then you discover, the different parts within your essence. And, one of the greatest discoveries was that we do have inside us these two forces that I think we instinctively feel, but just acknowledging the fact that, again, Hashem made us with these two conflicting tension forces, and we all have them. Right. And these are two parts of us that are in battle. And one part of us is the part that wants to do, things right, and wants to do meaningful things, and wants to do for others. And again, it's not a perfect side, but it's that side that is more fueled by doing the right thing, let's say. And then we have a side of us who wants to be in the way of that, who actually is often thinking about more selfish things, but being selfish isn't bad, but things that are not helping you grow, and that tension. And that side of us can cause us to be, let's say, very angry. That side of us can cause us to say things that we regret after. And in the book, I actually felt quite vulnerable to share that I think my ego does lead me to sometimes be angry too fast. And I don't like that inside. I'm not proud of it. I don't like it. And it often could happen with my children, that I would say that word that I would regret after, or, not respond to situations from a more thoughtful, considerate place, but more from the ego. And what I learned to do over the years is first of all, not feel horrible about it, but learn how to look my ego in the eye, in the same way that I look at other parts of myself and say, okay, like, where is this coming from? And can I maybe try to tame it a bit? Can I try to control it? And it's step by step. So one of the beautiful things about Jewish wisdom is that it gives you permission not to be perfect. And it tells you that you have both sides in you, but it really does encourage you to improve and to grow and to say, I actually want to be better. But if you're not getting it right, you shouldn't feel guilty. You shouldn't feel sad. You should just feel like this next moment is a new opportunity to getting it right. And I take these ideas also to my marriage. So the first 6 months of COVID, I know we all have our COVID stories, and some of them are heartbreaking and so sad. And I send my love and sympathy to anyone that's had a really difficult journey and lost loved ones. For me, the first 6 months of COVID was a hard time in my marriage. And I behaved in a way that were very ego-driven, maybe out of fear, I don't know. And I was really afraid to see what happened after those first few weeks, months of COVID, how that affected my relationship, our relationship. But then I caught myself and I said, Rega, just a second. We always knew these things could happen because I have a side of me that reacts to life in a certain way. But I can put my arms around it now, have a conversation with Yair and build again. And that's what we did. So acknowledging the fact that you have an ego that is often in your way of being the best version of yourself is normal, is important, and is part of the journey.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, that acknowledgement that it's part of you and knowing that it's part of you, but then saying, okay, how can I, that they come in tandem, because when you fight it, and say, and like you said, Jewish wisdom teaches, Hasidut teaches that it literally, we're built that way. That's how Hashem, God created us, to have that constant tension. But it's, like you said, it's hard. You don't want to always have tension. You want it to be, calm, but that's how we're wired. But then, like you said, okay, now what? How can we better the part of us that's in conflict with the better part of us?
Exactly.
So, this incredible journey that you've been on, how do you feel that has influenced kind of your corporate self? And when I say your corporate self, do you feel like you have is there a like Michal at home and a Michal at work, or how has that kind of influenced your positions in the corporate world at TikTok and Facebook?
So part of my life mission is that there isn't different personas that you wear when you operate in your different parts of your life. I actually think that the last couple of years even showed us even more that's not going to be how people, run their lives potentially. So no, I don't switch, I integrate, like many of us, the different parts of what makes me. And I guess many of us do that as well. So, I started my journey of kind of discovering Judaism or Jewish wisdom when I was at Facebook, and it was awesome. It was very special, and the reason it was special is because Facebook as a company was very welcoming this change or this share, let's say, because I joined the company relatively at the same time when I started studying Tanya, and we all have our own gifts from Hashem. Everyone has their own talents and gifts, and everyone's different. I do feel that Hashem gifted me by this filterless system where I just have to share what I believe in, what I care about, what makes me me. And when I joined Facebook on my first week of working in the company, my manager flew down from Dublin to meet me in London. And he asked me, first of all, he made huge efforts to say my name appropriate, like in the right way, which is Michal, which is not easy, which I really appreciated, and it shows care. But he also asked me, so Michal, what do you care about? And I never had this experience from a manager in, especially Facebook. Like I was working so hard to, develop my career and all of that. why is he asking me what I care about? It completely threw me off. And I guess I was so shocked by his question. He said, what do you care about so I can help bring that to life? And I said, instinctively, I said, I care about being Israeli and being Jewish and being a mom. And the moment I said that, I was like, Michal, what are you doing? You are telling your senior new boss at Facebook that what you care about has to do with faith, with nationality, and with being a mother. Like, why are you doing this to yourself? You should say you should care about work. But obviously he caught me in this moment of being completely authentic, which was great. And then he said, I know nothing about Judaism. Tell me what it means. And I said, well, it means lots of things, but what it also means is that I light, and this is when you try to explain someone to someone that has nothing. So I said, listen, it's going to sound a bit, but let me just explain. Every Friday, depending when it becomes dark, I light candles. And after that, I have no technology. I can't respond to any of your emails. I take 25 hours of emotional, mental detox, and I only connect with the family. And so he was like, that sounds jolly way of celebrating. And I explained to him, and there's no flexibility here. It has to happen every single Friday. It doesn't matter if we have an offsite. So I educated him with a smile. And I also said, this is a tradition that goes back thousands of years. And by doing this, I connect with my ancestors, and it's a special way of me being myself. And since then, every single Friday for the 5 years that he was my manager, he sent me messages on Friday afternoon, Shabbat Shalom, log off now. And it was beautiful. He gave me permission. He gave me space. He was an angel, right? To be myself. And he would send me messages, happy fasting, or, stuff like that. And, I know I'm lucky, but there's lots of people like that when you educate, when you share it, when you share it in a culture meaningful way, not with stress, not with anxiety, then why wouldn't someone go with you? And he said, listen, you'll make the hours. I don't care. Don't tell me. You just need to get the job done. But, it was beautiful. And I really hope that we can be that person for other people, for other faiths and non-faiths, for whatever people need to be themselves. But I also learned the lesson of being courageous and actually saying, this is who I am.
I know you have a great Eshet Chayil story.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could share that with us, because I love it.
Yeah, so also on my journey at Facebook, because I was there for a good 7 years, unfortunately, I lost a friend, a colleague, way too early in her years. And my colleague, she was a Jewish mother, wife, leader. And when we lost her, and we were preparing her memorial, and in front of the whole European team, and her team were preparing beautiful speeches and videos and all sorts of important ways to remember her. But I wanted to share her story from a perspective of being Eshet Chayil, because she was an Eshet Chayil. She was the one that had calls on Friday, midday, with her team. So she would put her laptop on her kitchen table. She would make chicken soup and challah, and just do it in front of her team. And they said that they can feel like they're smelling the chicken soup as she was preparing it, and looking after her kids and traveling. She did all of that. So I asked if I could share Eshet Chayil. What is the idea of Women of Valor in front of the whole Facebook European office? And that's what I did. I stood on a big stage, and my voice was broken, and I was completely couldn't stop crying. But I did read Eshet Chayil, and we sang it, yes, Women of Valor, to the whole office. And we told them, what does it mean to be an Eshet Chayil? And that our friend was an Eshet Chayil, and that's her legacy. And I cannot tell you how many messages I got after that event from dozens of women and men saying, not Jewish, saying how beautiful this moment is to celebrate the woman in the family, or a person in the family that has so much credit in building the family. And it was just a beautiful cultural building bridges moment. It was scary to stand on that stage and sing. I didn't sing, my friend sung, but I said, how are they going to react to this? It's a religious text, but I shared it in a cultural relevant way. The words in Eshet Chayil are relevant today. How much are we juggling today? Right? We're building, we're the selling, we are the same Eshet Chayil that Melech Shlomo, we don't know exactly who wrote it, wrote about, or Abram about, about a Jewish woman juggling. We're still juggling. So we have to celebrate the fact that we've been juggling for thousands of years, and that Friday night is our moment.
Yeah, I absolutely love that story. We're going to, do we have some time for a few questions, Michal?
Yeah, I saw them coming in. It's 1:30 a.m., so it doesn't really matter what I do now.
So I think Yisrael and Khanchi, hand over the floor to you guys.
Wow, that was incredible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go with the first question. Can you give examples of how you apply your knowledge of Jewish wisdom to your job?
So I think one of them is the example of, sharing Eshet Chayil or Shabbat. I think it's how to share it in a meaningful, I believe in packaging, right? Like sometimes you have the best idea, but if you package it in a non-welcoming, not connecting way, you're missing an opportunity, right? But, the same way that I share some of these stories with my, I know we shouldn't say Chiloni, but my let's say religious friends in Israel, right? They're saying, well, have you lost your mind? So I tell them maybe, but I tell them these experiences that I have and these wisdoms that I'm learning in a way that could be relevant to them. Why would anyone not want to have a day a week of rest, right? Why would anyone not want to connect to themselves and to their family for 25 hours with no disruption? So yes, I share these ideas, but not from a, you have to do this, but more, hey, this is really working for us. Do you want to hear more approach?
Very nice. So how do you come to Torah, Tanya, Chassidut in the first place?
Okay, so this, you can read more in the book. I Googled, I Googled in a very, very low day that I had, which was a Saturday morning. I now call it Shabbat. That's when I went after that episode of the Botox and the fillers, and I wasn't looking myself. I was a bit afraid of myself, maybe, or what's going on in my head. So I sat by the window and I actually saw a Frum family walking to shul. I wish I could find that family. This family is the family that led me to this Google search. So I took my laptop and I searched anxiety, fear, depression, happiness, joy. And for some reason, and maybe it is that family that I saw walking quite peacefully to shul, I added Judaism. And these search words took me to a professor in psychology called Dr. Katie Lowenthal. And Dr. Lowenthal is Chabadnikit. I reached out to her out of the blue and I said, hey, you don't know me. I've been looking at your research about the connection between emunah, faith, and joy and mental health, and I need your help. She was my first in to this world of Jewish wisdom in Chabad.
Wow. Okay, so someone has like a military question. How do you apply those principles to military service?
I don't know. I was in the military many years ago, before I know the Jewish wisdom. I actually share in the book, there's a chapter about my service and how all the mistakes that I made as an officer, but also how I learned from them. I think now that I learned about Jewish wisdom and actually what it means to be a leader in Judaism, I am very much inspired by Moshe, by Moses, and his care for our people, carrying us metaphorically and also physically with his being a shepherd himself. I think if I had the chance to be in the military again or in a similar service, I would find inspiration by how Moses led us with huge amount of care and empathy, and seeing each of us and never, never, ever leaving anyone behind. I feel that was really inspiring for a leader.
Have you spoken to your children about the Holocaust, and at what age?
Yeah, so this is a sensitive area. Many of these things I tried not to tell my children about, but somehow, of course, they know it all. So I think we're very much, I guess, third generation Holocaust home. It's very different to how they would experience it in Israel, which would be much more intense and much closer to home. You know, there's a siren in Israel. It's a different way of remembering in Israel moments of the Jewish history. They know that it's my life mission to tell my grandmother's story. And now it's their life mission, I hope, as they grow.
How did your parents feel about you coming closer to Judaism?
It was interesting. I'll tell you the ending. My mother started lighting Shabbat candles at the age of 71. So that's the end of it. But there's obviously 8 years in the middle. My mother was very, very happy for me because she said, "Ma baya, what's the problem?" Right? And also because we worked hard for everyone to feel comfortable. So when I come to visit them in Israel, my parents' home is a holy place for me. And I will do everything to respect them and to make them feel comfortable, even if it's things that I do less in London. And that's how I guide my children. So my parents never felt uncomfortable. What I would say is that my mother is making huge hishtadlut. And now when I visited my parents last week, we were in Israel when we had the call, right? So when I arrived from the airport, I came by myself. My parents came to pick me up. And this is a personal story, of course. And I arrived to their house, and they still don't, keep kosher. And they took their table and they split it in half, and they made half of the table completely kasher, wrapped it and did all of that. And the half of the other table is there. And in the middle, there was a gin and tonic. And it was so beautiful. And I sent a picture to my husband. Such a blessing to have parents that are going on a journey with you. And I hope that they're really role modeling for me how a parent can learn and flex later in the journey of life, right? If you told them that they would do it 10 years ago, they would laugh. But they're doing it because they love me and they care about me, and I love them and I care about them. And gin and tonic always helps, regardless of what you're going through in life.
How many more questions do you think we have time for?
Let's do a couple, because I also want to respect people's time.
Okay. So I'm just going to go in order. So this person wrote, "I'm so inspired by your way of being and level of transparency. And I'm super curious, how do you bring your emphatic leadership to the teams who you serve?"
I really, one of the nice things that I experienced with aging and getting closer to 50, I guess now, is that I'm starting to feel comfortable in my own skin, finally. So some things can't be accelerated. I think you have to go through a couple of things maybe in life, and until you get to a point when you feel like you can actually be yourself with whoever it is, the CEO of a company, your team, your parents, your husband, and doing it all thoughtfully. I never bring myself blah. I try not to. I think about who's in front of me and what parts of me are now relevant for this person. How can I add value to this person through staying authentic to who I am? So it's a lot of work. I never sleep, really. I always think. But like many of us, when we fine tune how we bring ourselves to the world and to the different people in our world, our own personal world, then we're more effective in life. So hopefully I bring it to work and to my team as being this authentic colleague to work with that is very open about who she is and what she cares about.
Beautiful. I'm looking to start reading more about Jewish wisdom, your discovery. Are there other Jewish women authors or books that you recommend?
So I'm sure there are. I have to be honest, one of the reasons I wrote the book, thank you for the person asking this. One of the reasons I wrote the book is that because I was looking to read a woman who was like me, wearing her jeans and not covering her hair and not being raised in a certain way and living between worlds. I was looking for someone that I can connect to. And most of the books that I saw were written by rabbis, which is fantastic, but it wasn't really truly relatable for me. So that's one of the reasons this book is a mission, to start bringing Jewish women voices, sharing our experiences. I know that there are books on the shelf. What I would say that I love reading, other books that have to do with Jewish wisdom, and I can share those lists later on. Jonathan Sacks, Zichro Levracha, is truly inspiring. He was very close to the Lubavitcher Rebbe as well, and actually went on his journey similar to Frankel through encouragement from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Both of them published and went on their journey because the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, you have to cross your bridge and do what you're here to do. And that includes Viktor Frankl as well. So Jonathan Sacks, I think, writes for people like maybe me, who are just curious to learn and are in between, or just always learning or growing or not sure where they belong, something like that.
Nice. Okay, so this is actually the last question. The title of your book is What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? How did Judaism make you not afraid? Maybe I missed this in the beginning of your talk. I think someone that came on a little bit later.
No, you didn't miss. So what would you do if you weren't afraid is a strong mantra that I learned within actually Facebook, the company. And this was an invitation for employees to not be afraid of making mistakes. Because when you're afraid of making mistakes, or if you're afraid full stop, then you can't unleash your creativity and your potential, because you're always holding back. And I discovered through the ideas that we share today that Judaism is all about acknowledging the fact that you might feel some fear, but then immediately you have to encourage yourself to overcome it and cross your narrow bridge. So I'm not comparing Jewish wisdom to Facebook company culture, but it's really nice to see how we knew it first, in the sense that, we will feel fear, but then we will also overcome it, because we have what it takes to overcome fear and take that step on the bridge. So what would you do if you weren't afraid is a question that will help us realize what are the things that we want to be or do and we're not doing because we're afraid. And then it can help us think about, what do we need to do to be able to do those things in order to grow? That's the idea in the book.
Amazing. Wow. I actually just want to say that I'm part of a book club, and I read your book. We read it as the very first book, and we couldn't get over it, just how relatable, and we learned so much. So that's how we thought we came up with the idea of having you. And
I read all her books.
Kol hakavod.
So we want to thank you, and 1:45 a.m. That's just incredible of you for sharing yourself, and so personal. So we really appreciate it, and phenomenal.
Thank you.
Carol,
Really.
Thank you so much. That was, wow. I was taking notes.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me. And back to you, Paula, and to your father. And Avraham ben Pesach is in our hearts and souls forever now. So thank you so much for making tonight happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Hope you get some sleep.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining.